Hey guys, welcome to another episode of InRange. Today we're out here with Sinister Rifleman, Russell Fagan, and we're doing a Vortex Prism, or prismatic optic system kind of roundup. These are two new offerings from Vortex, right? Relatively new. We have a 3X here and a 5X, but maybe Russell, you could give us a little more about what these are.
So these are the Vortex Spitfire Gen 2. They were released this year.
Okay.
They share a couple common features. One is that they both accept aim-point micro-style mounts.
So the entire mounting system that's out in the market already, you can use them.
Yeah, so whether you're trying to mount it to an AK or something like a RS Regulate mount, you could bolt it lower on those. Or if you want a lower mount, QD mount, whatever, you can use a lot of stuff that's already out there. They have battery illuminated reticles, plus or minus. They run on CR2032 batteries. They have adjustable diopters, so you can focus them to work with your particular eyesight, which for people like me that wear corrective lenses is important. They both have 1 MOA adjustments.
Okay.
Some people have made an issue of that it isn't fine enough. I haven't found it to be a problem.
Okay.
But once we start moving beyond those basics, the specifications between the two open up a bit. The 3 power has a roughly 40% bigger field of view at 100 yards.
Okay.
Interestingly, they both share the same reticle of a kind of a horseshoe dot system.
With BDC Stadia.
With BDC Stadia, calibrated to be zeroed with 5.56 at 50 yards.
Okay.
But the reticle is scaled to the magnification. So the reticle in the 3 power is smaller to the shooter's eye than the reticle in the 5 power.
Okay. And so weight-wise, what are we looking at here?
This one's 9 ounces. This one is around 11 ounces without the red dot mounted on top of it.
So the 5X is a little heavier.
Yeah. And the 5X does have the unique ability to mount the Vortex Venom red dot to the top of it that the 3 power does not have.
But we are not talking about the red dot today. We're talking strictly about the prismatic sight, so we've got the red dot just covered up with a lid. Price-wise?
This one has an MSRP of $550. The 5 power has an MSRP of $650.
Okay, so since we've got two sights here that are essentially roughly equivalent except in terms of magnification. Same Stadia, same reticle. This one's a little lighter, a little cheaper. This one's a little heavier, a little more expensive, but not a lot. 3X versus 5X. We've got some targets downrange. We've got a steel plate at 50 yards, and we've got a spinner at 50 yards. So one of the things that we can talk about, or maybe we can show off here on the video, is we can go back and forth. Steel plate, spinner, and that may give us a little bit of an idea, at least, about dynamic movement between targets, but also the differences of how the reticle appears to our eyes, but also the field of view. Even though it's 50, there's still going to be a difference in field of view.
All right, so tracking between shooting the spinner and then shooting the static plate back and forth.
Yeah. Seem like a good idea?
Yep, sounds good to me.
Let's give it a whirl. Okay, Fagan, so you got the 3X Vortex Prism here, right? Yep. So we're going to start on the steel static plate on the right, and then go back and forth with the spinner. And then when you're done, when the spinner spins, go for it. Over.
All right. It's quite a bit of movement to track, and then you got to get back on the spinner and see where the spinner's at before you can send it.
Seems like a good test.
Yep.
All right, 5X. Go for it. Over. Okay, this is the 3X unit. Much larger field of view, but that reticle, honestly, is kind of super tiny. Let's see.
Over.
Whew. Huh. I think there's things to think about here.
Over.
Okay, so we just went through a standardized drill, for lack of a better term, that's transitioning from a static plate to a spinner target. And it's a spinner target you haven't shot before, so it's a little different.
It does behave differently than the MGM spinner.
It does favor the bottom plate, or it seems to. Regardless, I think this was actually a really interesting way to test out these prismatic optics. Now, we're not shooting at range, but it does tell us a lot about what these do. So, from your perspective, you shot both the 3 and the 5. What's your take?
I think I prefer the 5.
Really?
Even though it's a narrower field of view, the reticle is easier to visually acquire and locate on the target where you want it because of its size from the shooter's perspective.
So it was a little harder to transition, but then once you were there, you could see the reticle faster.
Correct.
And the 5 does have the ability to throw the red dot, which we did not use the red dot, but you could put the red dot on it, which changes everything for close range. So, but you did fine with the 3.
Yeah, between the two, though, I think still with the 5, just because the way the reticle's easier to see.
Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going with the same conclusion. When we went, I succeeded with the 3 and the 5, and the transition with the 5 was maybe slightly more difficult. But the reality is the reticle size in the 3 is so small, at least with my eyesight, which is not as good as it used to be when I started InRange, but still acceptable. That reticle in the 3 is tiny. There's a donut that's hard to see. There's a dot, which is almost impossible to see. There's a BDC, which is, I don't think, useful. It's too small. It just looks like a bunch of lines.
It's really fine.
If you were to aim that at something at 300 or 500 yards, you'd be obliterating what you're aiming at.
Right. You have to do a hard focus on your reticle, which is a bit counterintuitive. The same issue does not exist with the 5 power.
And the illumination on both of these is woefully insufficient to be used as illumination in the Arizona desert.
What it does do for me when I'm looking through it is when you're on a black target, it gives you just enough contrast to see the reticle.
But if this was brighter, it might have been fine because then it could work sort of like a red dot, but it's not bright enough. And so what I found is that I went from the big target to the little target. I actually threw a miss with that, not because I was going too fast. The truth is I had a hard time actually seeing the dot and put it on the target. It just was wash. And if you were to use the 5 at distance, the BDC stadia lines would actually be usable. Do you agree with all that?
I agree with all that. So I actually used this optics package, this rifle, at 2 of the Rio Salado matches, once at Rio Black Rifle and once at the Rio Salado multi-gun. And in that environment, shooting out to 400 yards, they found it very capable.
Yes.
I have not had the chance to use this on the clock at a match, but after a little drill out here, I'd stick with this, particularly because when you take that off and you got the red dot on top, it's pretty darn quick up close. The height of the optic, being on top here, really isn't much worse than some of the super tall red dot mounts people are using today anyway.
No, you just do the normal chin thing. So you go down here for a normal weld, go to your chin, and then boom, you're on the dot.
And one thing that does actually help you with is if you're trying to find where to align your optic to see a target at a much further distance, you can paint it with the red dot, then dip your head down and you see it there.
So you kind of you kind of chipmunk, you see the target, you go the dot, you put the dot on the target, boom, you go to magnification.
Right.
Yeah. So, but that does add quite a bit more expense.
Yeah, it's the Vortex Venoms are a couple $100. So
well, this was $100 more than that, and then another $200 for that. So you're looking, if you'd want to do this 5X stack, you're about $300 more than the 3X naked.
Correct.
However, I don't know why you'd want that.
Yeah, the capabilities of the 5X with the red dot on top of it are much greater overall. And the weight penalty isn't that much.
I would also say, honestly, even if I couldn't put the stacked red dot, I'd still just go with the 5. Because then the BDC is usable and the reticle's easily acquirable.
I would agree.
Yeah, so they're clear. Glass is clear.
It's surprisingly clear for made in China optics.
Yeah, they're fine. There's no issue with that at all. Looking down range is nice and clear and crisp, but it sounds like we're on the same page. In conclusion, if you were to go for one of these two prismatics, and prismatics are good for people who have astigmatisms too, because they don't show up, right?
Right, and you can adjust the focus.
Right, which you can't do with a red dot. Red dots, you get that thing. So if you had to go with it, we're on the same page. Go with the 5X. Well, so did Vortex send these?
Vortex provided both of the Spitfire optics for the review. I purchased the Venom myself.
Okay. And the ammunition we used today was all courtesy of Patreon supporters that keep this channel alive. So, as you already probably know, if you watch this channel regularly, this is not a sponsored channel. Vortex does not sponsor us. They did provide the optics, but we always give honest reviews. And the reason we're able to do that is because InRange is completely a viewer-supported project. Only you, the viewer, via patreon.com/InRangeTV. Thankful to all of you that do that. If you'd like to consider it, you can find us there. And if you can't, the other thing you can do to help us, subscribe to the channel, but more importantly, share the video with people you think might find it interesting, because then you are therefore an organic algorithm. And the YouTube algorithm's not good to us, but you in the viewer world can be much better to us. And by sharing the video, you're helping us get views and promote essentially InRange TV. Thanks for watching.